Hi, this is Rick from Green Our Planet. Today we're in one of the school fruit orchards and I want to talk to you about fruit tree pruning. So pruning, when do you do it? Well, for most trees, and deciduous trees, trees that lose their leaves in the wintertime, you want to prune in the wintertime when they're asleep. The only trees that are not pruned when they're deciduous are citrus trees, and they're pruned in the spring or early summer after fruit is set. So the first steps of pruning a tree are identifying the tree. You want to find out the age of the tree, the type of tree, and where the fruit is produced. That's going to guide your next pruning steps. Some trees are pruned to more of an open center. Some trees are pruned taller, like you'd see most landscape trees. And some trees are pruned open shape, kind of a bush shape. If you're going to prune fruit trees, you're going to need the right equipment. And what I have here is a pair of loppers. This is for larger cuts. Pair of bypass pruners. This will be for most cuts, most smaller cuts on the tree. Pruning saw for larger cuts. Alcohol for sanitizing your tools, either in between each cut or definitely in between each tree. And of course, gloves. You can wear heavier gloves, leather gloves, if you're working around a lot of thorns. I like lighter gloves because they're not as heavy. The first type of cuts you should be making on your fruit trees are the large structural or thinning cuts. These cuts are made using your loppers or your pruning saws, and they help develop the structure of the tree and open up the tree for the smaller cuts, which should come after this. Unlike the peaches and the nectarines, which are the hardest trees in your orchard to prune and to keep pruned, figs are one of the most forgiving. They are one of the few trees, pomegranate is another tree, that grow on their own rootstocks. They are not grafted. So if a fig grows up from the ground, you can choose to keep it. You can grow figs any way you want. You can grow them as a bush. You can grow them as a tree. You can grow them as a multi-trunk. They will allow you to do absolutely anything to them. You just have to know their fruiting secrets. So a fig only fruits on current year's wood that grows from last year's wood. So last year's wood will be identified as the more dull and brownish wood, and newer year's wood is more translucent and redder shaped. In their home country, figs will produce all year round. Here, we get two crops. We get a spring crop that forms on last year's growth, and we get a summer crop that forms on the growth that comes out of last year's growth. So figs are pretty reliable to harvest in a year. They're one of the few trees that do that. You follow the same rules for figs as you do with any other tree. Remove downward facing growth. Remove any straight upward facing growth unless you want it to be a central leader. On this tree, we don't have to worry about that. We do have a central leader, and I'm going to keep it a central leader. We have a few branches growing from the ground that I'm going to remove because I just don't need them. And I'm going to take away some of this lower growth because, again, like on the other fruiting trees, I don't want to reach down to get the fruit. I don't want fruit dragging on the ground. I don't want critters eating my fruit. I want to keep everything up and easily grabbable. So let's get into making a few cuts on this tree. Normally on figs, there's a couple of rules that you want to try to follow. You want to stay about 24 inches between branches as you move vertically up the tree. And you want side branches spaced about 16 inches from each other, or is 16 inches in length. Because what you're gonna do is every year, you're gonna cut these back down to 16 inches. And they're gonna regrow a new crop for you. This is still a young tree. I'm a little bit more forgiving on the space, but I am going to keep that in mind as we grow the tree up. The branches that I'm gonna keep are gonna have that 24-inch spacing as we move up the trunk. And all of this growth is either going to be established scaffolding branches, which I'll allow to grow out as far as I want. When they're small and low to the ground like that, I'm going to keep them within a reasonable 16 inches. When they start to get a little bit higher and above head height, I'll let them branch out and give us a little bit of shade in this part of the garden. So when I make my cuts, I'm going to cut any low stuff. I'm going to cut these branches that are coming out of the ground. I need my heavy-duty pruners for this. And you'll notice that I'm cutting these actually in the dirt. So I need to re-sanitize these before I use them. I'm not going to need them anymore, so I'm going to set them to the side. You definitely don't want to use any of your cutting tools that have touched the dirt before you re-sanitize them. So we're going to take out all this lower growth. We're going to take out all the downward facing growth. Some of it's kind of wrapped up around the green tape. Why am I making all these cuts first? Well, these are the cuts that obviously need to be off the tree. They're not doing us any good the way they're growing, so get rid of them, get them out of the way so you can get a clear view of your tree. Now, just by doing the cutting that I did, I have these beautiful scaffold branches right here. They're all going in 4 separate directions. I'm gonna keep all 4 of these. This is exactly what you want on your tree. 3 to 4 branches, evenly spaced around the trunk, and then you want to develop the side branches to grow and fill these spaces in between them. Remember what I said about the 16-inch length? These are gonna be 16 inches or less, and I'm gonna cut them back every year. So, just cut that back. All the figs will form on the new growth. This one here is in the way. I can just simply twist it off the plant. I guess not. And I have another branch forming over here that's going to give me fruit this year, more than likely. So I'm going to let that establish. And then 16 inches farther up the trunk, I'm going to start a new set of branches by heading this. Remember the heading cuts? Clip this tip, develop branches and leaves farther down. So now that we've got our first set of branches, I know I'm gonna go up 24 inches or so. Since this is a young tree, I'm gonna be a little bit more forgiving. I'm gonna leave this at 12 inches, just so I get some fruit this year. This one and this one. I'll cut this out later, and these will be my new branches. Perfect 24-inch length. Since this is so long, we have other branches that it's competing with. I want to cut this about the same length as this. And I have this perfect branch here that's already established. So now all these branches are all about the same length. This one will catch up fairly quickly. I'm going to leave these alone. I'm going to leave this one alone. This one I'm going to remove because it's downward facing. This one I'm going to leave just to fill in the space right here, so I have a little bit of canopy to protect from the sun. Normally this tree doesn't need to be painted to protect it from the sun. Figs are pretty resilient. I still paint them. Anytime that I've done a lot of pruning and I open up the canopy, I still paint it just to be sure, just to be protected. Trees are expensive. Protect your investment. If you're unsure whether or not it can get sun scald, then protect it against sun scald. Right now, these will be my permanent branches until the tree gets a little bit taller and establishes its upward branches. And then A couple years down the line, I'll cut these out. Normally, your branches should start about knee height or thereabout for younger, smaller trees. For established trees, you can limb that up a little bit so you can get underneath the tree and do whatever work you need. But generally, this is the height that you want to start your first limbs at. And that's it. That's all there was to pruning this tree. Now every year I will come back and I'll prune this back to just about the same length. I'll prune these back every 16 inches to develop my branches. And I'll just continue that process farther up the tree. So we're here to prune this more mature fig. This fig is nowhere near grown up. Full grown, these trees can easily get to be 30 to 50 feet tall. They can grow quite massive, even where we are. Who's ever pruned this tree in the past has done a really great job. They've developed the branches the way they were supposed to. All we're going to do today is just clean it up a little bit. We're not going to do anything too disturbing to the tree. We're just going to prune up some of the lower branches. We're going to prune some of these branches back to the 16-inch length that we talked about with the smaller trees. We're just going to clean it up a little bit. So, mature fig. So just like any of the other trees, I just want to clean up these lower branches that are on the ground, downward facing growth and straight upward facing growth. A lot of times when you know your trees, you don't really have to think about too much as you go around the tree and do your cuttings, because you already have an idea in your head about what you want the tree to look like. You've got your established side branches. You want to go up another 24 inches, which is about the room we have here. So I'm just going to do a little heading cut in order to get the branches going on that. Just kind of looking over, taking out some of the more outward facing branches. You don't have to get really fancy with figs. As long as the branches aren't overlapping any other branches, you can leave as many as you want. For this fig, I want to get a little bit more upward growth on it rather than this low sloping growth. So I am going to leave a lot of these upward facing growths here so I can eventually turn these into a central leader. Eventually I want to get this to the size where it's shading this area around it. It's nice that it's easy to harvest right now, but I do want to make it more of a shade tree while still giving us fruit. At some point these branches may not be here in the tree's future, but for right now they are my guiding branches. There's 3 of them going in different directions. I'm going to keep them for right now. So I'm building the second tier of branches, which are these. And I may not even keep those in the future, but I do want them there just in case I decide to use them. So after I establish these, got a branch going in each direction. I'm going to remove this branch, this downward facing branch. Now I've got my second tier of branches set and I don't have to touch them. So moving up from there, you want to take everything out that's in between these branches and the branches you want to keep up above them, again at the 24-inch level. All I basically did was open it up, make sure that none of the branches were crossing or that they were interfering with each other. Come springtime, when it wakes up, if any of these branches start interfering with each other, I'll cut it again. You can do small cuttings all through the year, but save your big branches for winter or dormancy cutting. And that's it. That's all I'm going to cut on this fig.